Like lots of you guys out there, we're dealing with the coronavirus, so instead of having our agronomy focused video at a CVA location, this time we're going to do it in studio. I'm Tim Mundorf, Nutrient Management Lead for Central Valley Ag. Today we're going to talk a little bit about nitrogen application, we're going to talk a little bit about nitrogen products, we're going to talk about nitrogen use efficiency. So where I usually like to start with the grower is talk a little bit about how we make our nitrogen recommendations, and that's the reason for the blackboard and the magic marker today. When I think about a nitrogen recommendation, the first thing I think about is I want to talk to the grower about what your yield goal is. So if we start with a yield goal of say 200 bushel corn, one of the first things we're going to want to do is decide how efficient do we think we can be with nitrogen application. Normally we're going to start with a factor on that 200 bushel of corn. We know it takes approximately a pound of nitrogen to raise a bushel of corn. We take about 3/4 of a pound of nitrogen out of the field in the truck for every bushel we put on there. But we know we've got to grow a plant, and we've also got to make up for a little bit of loss that we're going to get out there. So typically for a grower, I'm going to say, let's go with about a 1.2 factor for nitrogen use efficiency. So 1.2 pounds of nitrogen is our base start for every bushel of corn. That ends up being about 240 pounds of nitrogen total. From there, we're going to start taking some credits off of it. Normally, if I've got soybeans as previous crop, I'll give a credit of about 40 pounds. If it's corn on corn, of course, that credit's not there. Some people will say, well, soybeans really don't release that much extra nitrogen. And I go with that argument, but I don't have to pay the penalty to break down those corn stalks. So I still get a credit. Maybe it's for soybeans, or maybe it's just for not having to break down corn stalks, however you want to look at it. We'll also give a credit for, say, carryover nitrogen. So if we're out there in your fields taking some samples and we know what a carryover nitrogen number is, so nitrates that are left over in the top 8 inches, and maybe we'll even go down into that 2-foot range. I'll just put a number up there and say maybe 25 pounds of carryover nitrate credit. Then from there, we can also make a little bit of a credit for your organic matter mineralization. Now, there's a lot more organic matter that'll mineralize through the growing season than we normally give these credits for, but to vary a little bit based off the organic matter on your farm, we'll put a credit out there. Generally, I shoot for around 10 pounds of nitrogen credit for every percent organic matter. So let's just say that this is a 2% organic matter field. We'll take off another 20 pounds credit. When we add that all up, our 240 drops down to 200. The 25 pound carryover nitrate brings it down to 175. And the 20 pounds of credit for the organic matter gets us to about 155 pounds of nitrogen, corn on soybeans trying to grow 200 bushel of corn. Now, if your organic matter and your biological activity kind of make that work, we might go with that recommendation. If in the past you've had corn turning yellow and it just doesn't seem like the mineralization is quite keeping up toward the end of the season, we might bump that factor up at the start. Or if you've had good luck with nitrogen application and the corn's staying a good green through the growing season, we could even drop that factor down a little bit. Before we start talking about dropping the factor down, and again, 155 pounds of nitrogen for 200 bushel of corn following soybeans is not a really aggressive recommendation at all. I would say, if anything, it's a little conservative. We might talk a little bit about multiple applications, and that's why I've got this plate of urea sitting in front of me. So for growers that want to increase their nitrogen use efficiency and maybe bring that recommendation down a little bit, or at least get more comfortable with making a recommendation as low as 155 pounds per 200 bushel of corn, I'd recommend multiple applications. And one of the reasons we talk about urea is for a dry land grower, again, for who that 200 bushel might be a goal, we'd like to put a second application out there. Maybe we start that out with fall or spring applied anhydrous ammonia, or a weed and feed with UAN, or maybe a coultered in UAN, or UAN going in front of tillage, but then maybe put down 100 pounds of that up front, but come back and make a second application of say 50 pounds, so we can kind of spread out the nitrogen to where the crop really needs it. If you look at how corn takes up nitrogen, early in the season when we first plant, say in April and May, there's very little uptake. For the most part, the corn plant lives off the nitrogen that's in that seed until it gets a good root system developed. And even then at say V2, V3, V4, it's taking up fairly small amounts. But as it gets to V8, V10, V12 into tassel, it really takes up a lot more nitrogen. Now it drops off as far as the rate a little here later as we get into, say, this is kind of more tassel and grain fill. This is kind of more into our V6, V8 range. but we really need to have nitrogen available for the plant right here. So if we can come back and make a top dress application in front of that V6, V8 time frame with rapid uptake, it's a good way to maximize nitrogen use efficiency. So as you think about your nitrogen recommendation and working with your agronomist, think a little bit about that formula, how we take credits, what your credits would be on your farm, how aggressive you want to get with nitrogen use efficiency, and more importantly than probably anything, split application. So nitrogen, of course, has been a problem for us in groundwater. It's been a problem for us in surface water and some of the eutrophication or the hypoxia zone in the Gulf of Mexico. We really would like to get that nitrogen into your crop. And some of the ways that we can do best at getting the nitrogen into the corn crop that needs it and where you can make money off of it is to think through that total application, how we can maximize use efficiency by maybe splitting up application and making sure we're taking those proper credits where they're appropriate. If you got additional questions, I would refer to your field sales agronomist. And with Central Valley Ag, I'm Tim Mundorf, Nutrient Management Lead.